thank everyone for attending. I think it might be helpful before we start the agenda if we could just make introductions for the benefit of our viewers and benefit of some new folks that might be here this evening. My name is Susan Smiley. I'm on the Board of Selectmen for the town of Lancaster.
My name is Stan Starr. I'm also a member of the Board of Selectmen in Lancaster.
Stan Wysocki, Board of Selectmen in Bolton.
Don Lowe, Bolton Town Administrator.
Carrie Abdalian, Advisory Board Committee in Bolton.
Michael Wood, Superintendent of Schools for Neshoba.
Dave Lindsay, interested observer from Bolton.
Alice DeLuca, Minuteman School Committee from Stowe.
Ed Boquillan, Superintendent of Minuteman.
Okay, thanks everyone. And do we have school committee member representatives here?
We do, a bunch of us.
Oh, great, okay, so I don't know you folks, and I know a couple of you, but, so could you stand and just introduce yourselves, please?
Let's start.
Lorraine Ramasco, Bolton Rep.
Nancy Fettersfield, Chair from Bolton.
Kara Keith, Lancaster.
Thank you.
Kathy Tier, Lancaster.
Julie Fay, Lancaster.
Great, thank you, ladies.
Don Hawks, Selectman Stowe.
Okay, Dawn, we'd love to have you join us. Okay, well, we have Minuteman first here on our agenda, and Alice, thank you for reaching out. So we'll let you go ahead and,
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to speak to you for a few minutes. We have a busy, typically the Minuteman part of the town meeting agendas is not a busy time, but this year we do have a couple of items that are kind of complicated. We didn't want to take a lot of your time, but we did want to provide you answers to some questions that people have and try to run through a little bit about the budget and the regional agreement amendment, which has been cooking now for some 18 months or more in the current draft. And Dr. Boquillan is going to go over some slides that he has prepared, and then we'll have questions after, if you don't mind. Okay.
Sure, well, thank you. And this doesn't preclude our coming to an individual town meeting with FinCom or Selectmen to talk in more detail if you have additional questions to what we're able to answer in this time. I know you have a packed agenda, and I want to be brief. I'm not going through all 24 of these slides, but I will refer to them as we go through. I'm going to talk about the budget, a little bit about the feasibility study, the regional agreement, and then intergovernmental agreements. On page 2, slide 3, you'll see our budget drivers for the FY15 budget. We're expecting about a 6% increase in students. We realized about a 20% increase this year in our student population. That increases our special ed costs and direct instructional support. We also, this is a collective bargaining year for us, so we've tried to plan for some things within that. You can see on page 3, slide 6, that the overall budget is $19,600,000. That's up about 5.9%, but our increases to our member assessments for FY15 are only 3.8%. And if you averaged our assessments to the member towns over the last 5 years, it's averaged about a 1% increase per year over the last 5 years. You can see on pages 4 and 5 some other detail. I'll just mention the revenue plan. It's kind of small there, but the FY15 column, that $10.2 million, is the assessment to our 16 member communities. We're estimating about $2.1 million of Chapter 70 aid, $760,000 in regional transportation aid, and our tuition is going to contribute about $6.2 million to that total budget of 19.6, and then we're allocating $100,000 out of excess and deficiency. On page slide 9, page 5, you'll see the growth in out-of-district tuition revenue, which is really a major factor in our ability to keep the assessments at a reasonable increase over the last 5 years. Bottom line on slide 10 are the assessments for FY15, including the middle school program assessments for Bolton, Lancaster, and Stowe. You'll see the Bolton is up slightly, Lancaster is up slightly, and Stowe is down. And that's really driven by the third column and some other factors in the regional formula. But student enrollment, as you can see on slide 11, of the three towns has been fairly stable over the last 5 years. I'll just go right through the feasibility, and then I'll answer questions at the end. The MSBA feasibility, just a brief overview. In November of 2008, we submitted our statement of interest. We were invited into feasibility the following July, and we are about 1/3 of the way through a feasibility study as I sit here with you now. The extended timeline that you see in slide 14 is really important to take a look at. There seems to be a lot of different ideas about when Minuteman may come to our 16-member towns with a project. That's not going to be for at least 2 more years. You can see the milestones that have been outlined for us. The school committee would finalize and submit a preliminary schematic report in late summer of 2014. The MSBA would respond to it, and we would be approved to go into schematic design somewhere about a year from now. And that takes, as you know, some time, and we would be proposing warrant articles in the late fall, early winter of 2016, with the 2016 town meeting season as our target date for going to the towns with a proposal. And just so you know where that proposal is, on slide, on page 8 there, where we look at the annual tax impact on a median home's tax bill, worst case scenario, as we have outlined different models today, would be a $120 million project. Our MSBA reimbursement is capped at the low end of 40% as a minimum. We were grandfathered in and were able to keep that 40% that was awarded to us earlier on. A 30-year bond and no facility fee. I'll talk a little bit more about the facility fee in a moment. But that project would end up costing the average taxpayer in Bolton about $63 a year, Lancaster about $93, and Stowe about $92. The regional agreement on page 9. The regional agreement process has gone on in really 2 stages. One began in January of 2010. The other one, which was initiated about 13 months ago, was initiated with the help of the Department of Ed with a $50,000 planning grant to study the sustainability of the Minuteman Regional School District. We had a tremendous amount of expertise around the table from town managers, select board members, some FinCom members, and some school committee members from the region. We also invited to that process out-of-district communities, school committee members, who were sending Minuteman a lot of students and who still are sending us a lot of students. And we've kept them apprised of the process of revising the regional agreement as we've gone along. And just briefly, these bullet points are the significant changes in the regional agreement. The basic changes, we've brought it all up to code, so to speak, so that it meets all the regulatory requirements of a regional agreement in 2014. But assessment of annual operating costs and capital costs are going to be utilizing a 4-year rolling average. The appropriation of capital, which is now determined solely by the previous year's enrollment, is going to include enrollment. It's going to include a common 1% share for each of the 16 members, and the remaining 34% of any kind of capital project would be assigned to the communities based upon the combined effort variable, which is calculated by the Department of Ed as part of the Chapter 70 formula. And it's known fondly as the ability to pay. School committee weighted voting is proposed in the regional agreement. The admission of new members is easier. It allows the school committee an opportunity to negotiate the entry of a new member over a 3 to 4 year period. It allows members to withdraw. Currently, members would have to get the approval of all remaining 15 district towns to leave, and that's virtually impossible. The new agreement provides a pathway to exit that is based upon a non-disapproval of the remaining majority of communities. And that can be done by an active approval or by being silent. Authorization for new debt has a bit higher threshold, but we also agree to utilize in the new agreement the current method that we would use to gain approval, and that is that all 16 towns would have to approve it. The agreement goes a little bit further and quotes 16N, which allows for a district-wide ballot when it comes to approving debt authorization, where an aggregate vote of all voters in the 16 communities on a ballot that was held on the same day, the same time frame, would allow a simple majority of the aggregate to approve the vote. In the case where one or two individual towns may not have approved that debt, the withdrawal clauses within the new agreement allow that community to initiate a withdrawal and still not be on the hook for the debt if it was that distasteful to them. Amendments to the regional agreement, Don?
Thought it was worth pointing out that if the 16N process were followed and that special ballot had to take place, that the school district bears the full cost of the special election. That the
Yes,
individual
thank you.
towns don't
That's-
have to pay that.
Minuteman would have to pay all the costs associated with that vote throughout the entire district. Amendments to the regional agreement, although I have trouble thinking about amending the agreement again, would require a unanimous vote by all 16, or by all remaining members, to make any additional changes further on down the line with this. And then there's just a little more detailed comparison of the current versus the proposed. The intergovernmental agreement, I'm really pleased to talk about this, because as I've gone around the 16 communities and as I've listened to the concerns of the districts, the ability of non-member communities to participate in a capital project has been really the core issue. It's a common issue. And up until this last go-round with the Department of Ed and the Regional Amendment Agreement Subcommittee, we had really no opportunity to charge a facility fee. We had no way to engage those folks in participating in the capital resource they were utilizing. 45% of our students right now are from outside the district. And for the last 30 years, that number has ranged from 45% out of district up to 65% out of district. This has been over a quarter of a century, been serving the needs of kids from primarily 4 large cities: Watertown, Waltham, Medford, and Boston. About 210 of our 340 out-of-district kids are from those 4 cities. So we've been approved to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with those larger communities. They would have to agree to enter into it as well. And the commissioner sets the tuition for the base tuition. And the commissioner is also going to set a facility fee based upon the relationship between MSBA and the district. So we have yet to get everything fully in writing from the Department of Ed, but the intergovernmental agreement has been approved, and our admissions policy is in the process of being revised to reflect that. In other words, students from member towns would be given first priority, students from intergovernmental towns would be given second, and if there's any space available, those 1 or 2 students that sometimes come from a single entity would be, their applications would be evaluated based on a space available basis and given the lowest priority. So we are allowed to do that under Chapter 74 regulations, and I think it is a game changer for the district in terms of its sustainability. So that's a high-level overview of everything. I know it's a lot of information. I have more detailed information here that I'll leave you, and obviously this is a little bit longer, but we'll be glad to take questions.
Thank you.
So that's a high-level overview of everything. I know it's a lot of information here that I'll leave you, and obviously this is a little bit longer, but we'll be glad to take questions.
You,
through the, some chairing this, right?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
me?
Yes.
Okay. I noticed the fiscal 15 current year tuition drops quite a bit, and that the fiscal 14 per pupil expenditure is up quite a bit. I wondered if those were related or what the reasons for those fairly significant changes were.
I'll answer the easy question first. The FY14 per pupil is up because we added a significant amount of capital to the budget in FY14. Because as you may recall, I think it was the previous fiscal year, we had a serious emergency in the facility, and we had to come back to all the communities to ask for another $500,000. We decided it was more prudent to build in those capital repair costs right off the bat, and that was a big factor in last year's increase in the budget. The prior year tuition and the current year tuition, let me just speak to the current year tuition. You can see it's gradually been going down over the last 5 years in the revenue plan on slide 8. That was a conscious vote by the school committee to reduce our reliance on current year tuition down to 0 over 3 fiscal years. So what is called prior year tuition in this revenue plan is the tuition we're collecting right now. And just from a cash flow basis, from an operational point of view, it makes more sense to rely as much as we can on prior year tuition collected, because we know it's a solid number.
Superintendent, if I understand correctly, I'm going to write a briefing on this. The facility fee is an attempt to try to get at this nettlesome problem of out-of-district students avoiding any partial payment for capital costs. The new agreement, revised agreement, you kind of went quickly over it, but when you mentioned charging a facility fee, as I understood it correctly, maybe you could amplify a little bit, it could only be assessed to those communities who are party to the intergovernmental agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if Boston, for instance, chose not to execute an intermunicipal agreement, and they send 40 students to your school, we cannot charge a facility fee for those.
Right, and as I mentioned, their students would eventually lose access to Minuteman.
How would that work?
Over a period of time, our intent is to hold families and children harmless from this process of transitioning from an old agreement to a new agreement, transitioning from an old admissions policy to a revised admissions policy. So the year that this all goes into effect would be the following year. The students from those communities, their applications would be set aside until there was any room, if any. And as we have looked at the enrollment trends of vocational technical schools that have undergone a renovation, there's a tremendous increase in applications from member towns, and intergovernmental towns would want to continue to have access to Minuteman, because frankly there's no access to any other vocational technical programming for many of those in the programs that we offer that are not offered in their sending in their home community.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I'm curious, you mentioned you have 45%, you had a large turnout from the other towns outside the district. Are there any incentives you're offering those other towns for entry into the school district and or into
Currently?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No, that's a myth. There were in previous years, but in '08, there were some existing, I forgot what we called
I don't
them.
remember what year it was. There used to be contracts with some of those communities that sent 50 or more children to the school, but those have been eliminated over a course of time by a vote of the committee, so those are no longer there.
And what would you estimate timeframe-wise that the non-member communities would, if they were detached from this process, how soon can we fill that gap I thought I heard you say 310 or 340 students. I mean, there'll be demand, but how soon? We talking years later, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later before that's?
Well, as soon
Not
as the regional agreement is passed and the intergovernmental agreement is approved, we can look at implementing it at the beginning of next school year. The recruitment process begins about a year from now. So freshman applications that would be coming in a year from now would be those impacted by the new admissions policy. And so it would begin a gradual transition next year over the next 3 to 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
We'd be happy to come to any select board, finance committee meetings. Anyone who wants to hear more or talk more about these things, please call us, because we do want to get the word out and try to help people understand it. It's pretty complicated. It's kind of important.
Important, yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to mention, we have a little bit of a time constraint this evening. The library closes at 8 o'clock, so we're going to try to do our best to stay on message, and I think we can have a zone of 15 minutes, but that's about it. So we'll do a time check at close to 8. Okay, we have next on the agenda Florida football finals acknowledgement.
Alright, my name is Chris Stamos, and I'm part of the 8th grade Neshoba Chiefs. And recently we got to go to Florida to compete in the 2013 AOF National Championship. And I want to thank everyone that donated money to make it able for us to go. It was a lot of fun, it was a great experience. So again, I want to thank everyone, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Neshoba Regional School District 5-year capital plan.
Sure. So I wasn't quite sure if you were looking for the high school capital plan, whoever put that on the agenda.
Anyone here that requested that on the agenda?
But I mean, I can speak to it.
Many of the items on this were carryover
Okay.
from the one that was snowed out of Stowe, so perhaps we had so much snow that it obliterated the memory of
So I think that what might be on some people's mind is just a quick update on our space study task force that's in full swing. And thank you for choosing membership for that. It's been a great start to the conversation about the variety of space needs that we have. Nothing from that conversation, though, has entered into our 5-year plan because we haven't been talking about specifics in any way. But I'm sure as soon as we get to a point we've designed our methodology for conducting our study, or drafted it at least, and we will be starting to explore the components of that and starting collecting that data over the next 3 meetings, and then report out in June is our first milestone, is to report out then. So that's probably on some people's minds. As far as our capital plan for FY 2015 for the high school, the largest factor is a roof repair that is primarily between the academic wing, if those of you are familiar with the layout of the high school, with the academic wing and the gymnasium auditorium area. So it's the original building. It's where it's the main entry. Where you walk in, the main entry is a 2002 building, and then as soon as you get through the lobby, it turns back to a 1962 building. So that's the area for the roof repair. We have applied for a grant from MSBA to assist in that, so hopefully we'll have some reduction at some point, but we won't know about that for some time. I'm not expecting a reply from them much earlier than the May. I don't think we'll have it until the time of town meeting, but it should be somewhere around there.
That dollar amount was?
$175,000. Then it drops down precipitously to work on our baseball and softball fields, where we are just looking to repair those. Anybody that's been, again, on our softball field knows it's pretty rough. It hasn't had any kind of upgrade. And this is essentially reworking the soil and adding more soil to continue to level it out. We did add quite a bit of soil when we did the turf field renovation, so a lot of that leftover soil came down there, and we, again, those of you who are familiar with that area, there was a pretty good dip there of a good 10 feet or so. It's almost level there, but the field itself has a downward grade of about, I don't know, I think it's about 10%, but don't quote me on that. So, as I understand it, if you're at home plate, you can see the outfielder's knees looking up. So it's that kind of grade. So it's pretty significant.
Hitter's Park.
Yeah. So, and there's $40,000 in that. Then next are a couple of different $15,000 amounts that go to some security. We're adding cameras to hallways that don't currently have cameras. And exterior locations as well. Window replacement, we've had an ongoing plan there, again, to replace windows that are not tempered glass. And these are, we've been working on mostly the hallway windows here. These are not classroom windows. We have money in there for HVAC repairs through an exhaustive study of the HVAC system during the last summer. We have located a few areas that need repair or completion from the 2002 project, and so we'll be working on that. We do have some money in there to be working on some venting systems and science lab vents for chemistry hoods as well. And some items, locker repair and replacement and additions, cafeteria seating, doing some, going back to the security piece, some keying of the interior doors so that they can be locked from inside the classroom, which is a key component of our evacuation and our security plan. And shades in the classrooms, which again is part of the security plan. And then lastly, interior and exterior signage. We do have to complete an ADA requirement to have all of the signs be Braille, in Braille on the interior, and we are trying to put a couple of different signs in the exterior for visitors to our campus, so that they know where different building components are. We have nothing that tells where to go for the auditorium, where parking is for the fields and so forth. So we're looking to build some signs there. So that is our FY15 building high school plan.
What's the total aggregate?
So the aggregate is $362,500.
And that's in the budget?
And that's in the budget, correct. And then Bill Clary, our Director of Facilities, has met with Stowe and with Bolton Advisory and gone over their individual Stowe plans. We have yet to get a date for the finance committee for capital in Lancaster, but he's ready to do that and has been reaching out to have somebody contact him. So so whenever that works out to be,
Okay,
happy to do it.
we can help facilitate
It's
that.
pretty light on Lancaster this year.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Just, we were talking about a 5-year plan, so taking out the high school, and we did get a 5-year plan from Bill
Mhm.
on Emerson and Lawrence Sawyer. But I don't, do you have a 5-year plan for the high school?
We do.
I mean,
That's
is
1 year of the
that's why-
5-year plan.
Yeah, it would
Yes.
be interesting to see, I mean, it would be very helpful to see
Okay.
that 5-year plan.
I'll email it out to everybody. It's posted on our website on our finance page, but I'll
Right.
email it out.
Sometimes there's so much on that. That would be great, thanks, Michael.
Sure.
Next on the agenda is the proposed school budget, FY15 assessments, town budgets.
So, well, I don't want to steal the show.
No, go ahead.
So our aggregate assessment increase for the budget that's been proposed, the school committee's been meeting on, and we'll vote, presumably we'll vote on March 11th, is a 5.18% increase. The individual towns, Bolton's is at 4.83%, Lancaster is at 4.55%, and Stowe is at 5.94%.
Could I ask you to repeat those numbers
Sure.
one more time?
Bolton, I can give you, what the assessment page. People wanna take that, it's easier for you.
While we're passing papers, didn't you?
Sure.
I remember seeing something in one of the press reports earlier, that the budget increase for this year was in the range of 3.4 or something.
It's 3.72%, right.
How does that correlate with 5.18?
One is gross budget, and this is assessment increase.
All right, thank you. And the difference on that basically is, how would you explain it?
Of the three towns having a different,
3.5 roughly.
right.
Why is there this discrepancy
Well,
on the assessment?
because the two factors that are most important to the assessment formula as a regional school system are local minimum contribution, and then essentially the amount that are local revenues. So, and for each town, what makes it change so radically is that minimum local contribution number. So, and the state DOR assigns that, and that has to do with the income versus wealth factor for your local communities. So we're given that number and then we plug it into the formula.
I think the other piece is that your state money and other monies outside of the assessments are relatively flat.
Yeah, oh yes,
And
yeah.
so then
That's the-
anything that falls,
Right, that's the local revenue piece that I was
Okay.
referring to, that's all inclusive of that, right? Right, so our chapter 70 is flat, we're estimating right now we're estimating our regional transportation to be flat because the total state amount is flat. However, that number actually could go down because there are greater number, each year everybody's budget goes up in regional transportation, and essentially what they do is they back into the total budget amount that they have at the state level, so that number could easily be down this coming year.
Are there still any discussions about the various tiers of cuts?
Yes, they've been, had initial presentation of the various tiers in our last meeting. A lot of discussion, a lot of questions, and then we're hopefully going to be voting at our next meeting to which tier.
any, what's the word I want to get? You tell me, help me, Stan. Do you have any information now about how the conversation's going? Because I did watch the meeting, and
There were just a lot of questions trying to get at understanding what would be cut from the proposed or the initial proposed budget,
Mhm.
to get down to the various levels, just so we can see.
One thing I'll add, like, I've been trying to, we all want to keep it down because we all want more things for the town as well. We're from Lancaster, so we want new fire trucks and library hours, just like everybody else, but we also have needs in the school, so I've tried to investigate everything as much as possible. A line item, new lunch tables, that sounds simple to cut. Then you go find out there's kids sitting on the floor and on heaters in our lunchrooms. They're replacing the lunch tables because they're oddly shaped and they don't seat children, and our children are all on the floor. Everything has a need. It's not at all frivolous what people are asking for as I dig deep into every line item. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
And those various tiers are also on the website, aren't they? Or did they
It
get-
should be,
did they
yes.
get posted?
Yes.
When is that meeting?
March 11th.
Yeah,
March 20th?
March 11th,
11th.
6 o'clock.
Okay. Have you, so we haven't met, have you met with Lancaster's Finance Committee on any of this?
We met with, one member was able to, they had a cancellation of their meeting, but one member was able to meet with Lancaster representatives of the school committee and myself. So we had a very good meeting, and basically we had two items that seemed to have some need for some action items. There was some question about how we include capital in the formula, and George King was following up on that. And I believe a resolution has been worked out, and so people understand how it's reported. And then there was a question about fields and maintenance of the fields at Mary Rowlandson Elementary School. We're going to examine all three schools and make a recommendation to our school committee around that, just to make it the same in all three communities, and so that we can also ensure that that they're taken care of.
Thank you.
Michael, I've forgotten what the title for it was, the police presence that was gonna be at the school last year on a pilot program.
School resource.
School resource
Right.
officer.
Where does that stand in this year's budget?
So, we agreed to take that on, actually, at one of these meetings, we had a conversation about that, and so the full part-time position is now in the regional budget. So approximately 24,500.
And how many hours a week is that?
24, I believe.
Is,
20 to
I
24.
think it's
Yeah.
24, it needs to be divisible by 8, so I think it's 24.
okay, I'll go with his number.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's probably more, is it, in terms of how it works out, but,
That's right.
very dedicated people. It's really been a nice plus to the high school.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jen.
Who are these people?
Next on the agenda is lease of school property, church use. I'm not sure who put this on the agenda, but that person's here.
I think that relates to the Mary Rowlandson
Yes.
School and the church. I had a
Yep.
couple inquiries from citizens curious about the appropriateness, in their opinion,
Right,
and so if you can speak to
Sure.
that. Long-term lease, a year lease is what I heard, rumor in the.
I believe it's a year lease. We generally only do a year at a time. It's a lease, it follows, it conforms to our rental agreement policy. It's not the first church that we've rented to in terms of use of properties. As you may fall into this as well if you rent any of your properties. Under anti-discrimination laws, we cannot discriminate. Once we agree that we are going to rent them, we can't discriminate to any body or group. It certainly was unfortunate that in their, I believe this was a church startup, and it was unfortunate that the media blitz around the startup coincided with the rental, as well as with how they advertised, which was a picture of Mary Rowlandson Elementary School. And we did ask them to take that down, and they were very pleased to do so, and they did so. However, lots of pictures already went out, I guess, on some of the
That
flyers.
was a
and so
major
forth.
issue
Yeah.
for a couple of people, saying,
Yeah.
you're equating one and the same, and that's
Right,
that's
and it's
appropriate.
not.
What are the particulars of the lease, Michael? You share that with us?
It just it follows our rental agreement policy. They have use of the building just as others do. They pay for extra custodial staff that are required to be there. They don't have any access to anything but the space that they're using, which is the auditorium.
I'm drilling for a number,
Oh, I don't have that. I can get that for you. I don't have it.
please, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, Steve.
Any idea how it's successful, or any report back relative to the service? Is that an ongoing?
I haven't asked.
No. You weren't there?
I was not there.
Okay, I wasn't either, yeah.
Okay, moving along, update on union negotiations.
This is my item, I am your collective representative for the collective bargaining process with the units 1 and 6. Those have commenced, and obviously as the process goes along, it is in executive session privilege, the conduct of negotiations, so I can't give you any particulars. But following historic patterns, I understand, the first two negotiations have been with Unit 1, the teachers and...
Just teachers.
Just teachers, okay. And then the Unit 6 is the only other unit, but historically that follows the completion of negotiations with teachers. You can't say, well, we're going to give you the same deal as we gave the teachers, that's an unfair labor practice, but practicalities being what they are, it does provide a roadmap. But we've had two sessions, the most recent one was last night, made some progress. Each side has presented initial proposals, counter proposals. Some progress has been made in narrowing some issues. Overall, having been involved in a lot of negotiations that went on for months, and I was involved in one case in police work in fire work in down in South Shore town that went on for 6 years. So I was a little bit loath to take this job on, but I'm encouraged.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sounds
I'm overall I'm encouraged that this has gone on. It's very civil in nature and professionally conducted, and stay tuned for details.
Do you have an estimated timeline that you might assess?
My wife used to ask me when I was involved in mediation, so going out for a night meeting, she says, how long is this gonna last? I said, if you answer one question for me, I will answer that. My question would be, how long is a piece of string? You tell me that, and then I'll answer that one. There's no way of telling. At this point, I'm fairly cautiously optimistic that things are moving along well. But for me to say, okay, at the next meeting, there'll be an agreement, I can't do that.
Has the group set a goal at all?
A goal for completion? Well, ideally, I'd like to have it done before the beginning of the school year.
Right.
The
We have
actual
2 meetings set
contract-
up currently, just.
We schedule meetings, each meeting we have under our collectively agreed ground rules, we set the dates for the next 2 meetings. So we have the meetings set for one more in March and then one in April now. But the progress of those and the actuality of it being conducted depends on what happens when people think about things they might have heard at the meeting and come back with different ideas.
Okay,
So it can't really give you any definitive answer.
fair enough, thank you. Any questions on that subject matter? Okay. Moving along, discussion, late buses after.
This, Madam Chairman, this was my item I put on there. I have personal interest in this as well as some of my constituents. I have a daughter who's a junior at Neshoba, and she, along with several other people and their parents, have kind of come back. The late bus system operates in the fall, primarily geared to the athletic programs. That's correct. So the late bus is 5:30. The early late bus is 4:30. The problem comes in for, maybe it's a small group of people, but I don't know that. People who are engaged in not exactly extracurricular activities, because my daughter is in a chorus program, one of MIA's programs, which is a credit course conducted after school. By the time she and her fellow choral members get through with that, they've missed the 4:30 bus. Now, in the fall, and again in the spring, when the spring sports come up, they have a late bus. But it seems as if it's kind of focusing on, I won't say punitively, but it's creating a hardship for the people who are not in the athletic department.
How about the van?
And it would certainly make life a lot easier for myself and other people like me, if we didn't have to make another 22-mile round trip to Neshoba.
Okay. We'll take a look at the timetables.
You know, if there's
It's
anything.
supposed to be 4:30 and 6.
Right, it's 4:30 and 6, yeah,
Just, I don't know if that makes a difference, but just to clarify.
yeah.
All right, but it's just, if something could be adjusted
Right,
somewhere along the line.
right, and, yeah. I thought they were actually getting picked up at the 4:30 because it's only supposed to be a course, so it shouldn't be.
They're not out by that time, they're out a little bit later than that.
Okay.
They just miss it, and then they have to hang around and wait for parents to leave
Sure.
jobs or
Yeah.
other obligations to get out there.
Yeah, okay,
Those
we'll take
that
a
don't
look at that.
drive like my daughter.
Right.
Appreciate anything you can do on that. Thank you.
So the next item is, we're at 10 of here. So the next item is economic development opportunities, and I'm just gonna, who put that on here on the agenda? I just want to get an understanding, because that seems like that's gonna be a hefty discussion, so.
Or maybe not.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I'll throw out
Reserve
the
for next month.
thought here was that, every year we struggle with the budget, and we're very aware of the fact that the schools are the biggest part of the town budgets, and it always comes to cut, cut, cut. And, is there any way we could grow the tax base even a little bit to ease some of the stress, so that we don't have to decide whether we want to have classes that are a reasonable size or a new fire truck? Is there any way to find more money so we could have both? Because the towns are so heavily residential with very little business. And you look at, for example, Acton doesn't really have that much more tax base from businesses and commercial interests, but it's enough that there's just a little more wiggle room in their budgets, town versus schools.
So I would like to just acknowledge you speaking. Could I have your name and what town you're from?
Maureen Bush, Stowe School Committee.
Okay, thank you. So I think it might be a different forum that question and that discussion take place. Certainly, I'm sure fellow board members are always thinking about that. I know we are in Lancaster, so.
Madam Chairman, I know that it's certainly, all the towns share a similar tax base, and that's, our town administrator refers to it as structural impediments to raising more revenue. In other words, we don't have enough commercial and industrial. And it's not something you can just create, but it's certainly not something that escapes us. Certainly on our board, and I'm sure the other boards, we lament the fact that we're not Hudson, for instance, which can diversify with all of its alternative tax base. But it's not something that just can be created out of whole cloth. The towns are the way they are for historical reasons. People come to the towns, the town of Stowe at least, professedly for the type of town that it is. They don't want factories, they don't want big box stores. They want the apple orchards and all of the great outdoors and conservation land. And it comes down to a demographic split, I think. A lot of the newer folks that come into town, particularly if they're coming in and buying $700,000 houses, don't have quite so much objection to spending another $1,000 for some capital project or acquisition of open space land than the mom and pop who've lived here and raised their children in town. Children have now left, and they're left with their land poor. They have a small parcel of land paying $8,000, $10,000 a year in taxes on it. And there really isn't, you can't just carve it out and say, okay, we're gonna wish ourselves a 10% increase in our tax base other than residential. It's dependent on market forces to a large extent, but it's certainly, my point is, it's something we spend a lot of time agonizing about. It's not something that escapes us, at least not.
I would concur. Absolutely. I'm not sure if that gives you an answer, but certainly it's a subject that we're all grappling with, so. Okay, the next items here, Lancaster Field restoration, which, Michael, you've addressed. Thank you. I just had a question, a timeline on your recommendation?
Very soon.
Okay.
It'll be before the spring so that we can get going on some of that restoration.
Great. And then the next subject was the use of the high school fields from outside town organizations. If there's opportunity there, who would they contact?
Tanya Rich rents.
Height?
Tanya Rich.
Tanya, okay. And perhaps you could send us that point of contact information?
Sure.
Just the athletic director, right?
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, so just go to the high school website and look for the athletic director.
Okay. Okay, and that leaves us at April meeting schedule, which the next one is in Bolton on the 2nd.
If you follow our standard calendar. I'd just like to make a comment. I'm very pleased to see a substantial turnout of school committee representatives here tonight. Not to denigrate our superintendent's input, but I think it's...
I got them here.
But it's nice to see you, a good representation here tonight. I think that in the past, there have been comments made, we never see anybody or very few folks from the school committee. So I want to take note of the fact that you are here. Thank you.
Yes, very much so. In fact, we have a little sign-in sheet, and it would be helpful to have, oh great, it's going around, it's fantastic. It's very formal, so, in any event.
Professional records.
So, April meeting schedule again, 4/2, 7 PM in Bolton. Where would that be?
I'll be at the Houghton Building on Main Street.
Okay, great. Okay, so at that point, we have just a couple minutes. Do we have any new items, new business that we want to?
A passing thought here, anybody have any insight relative to any federal reimbursement for the October 2011 storm back to our towns? Is that anybody predictivity? I was understanding that we're looking for reimbursement yet to be received.
I think
that we're
we've
borrowing as a result of that.
I think we've received ours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Recently?
No,
quite some time ago.
I would
It was
get,
certified, it was part of the...
yeah, it's part of our free cash, that's right. So we received it in 2013, but I would say, God, I would guess it was late spring, early, 2013.
That sounds about right.
I can check that out, but I'm sure, I don't think we have any outstanding money due us from MEMA. Or
Did you
FEMA.
lend some to Lancaster?
No. Well, depending on the interest rate, we're always looking for revenue opportunities.
It must
you
be
know.
alphabetical, as
Yep.
Susan just mentioned.
Well, then Stowe's gonna have issues.
Yeah.
Do we all have town meetings same day this year, working out that way?
Ours is May 5th,
I think the first Tuesday in May.
first Monday in May.
First Monday.
First Monday in May.
Yeah.
Yes, yep.
Sometimes kind of one is leading the other by a week or so.
I think a decision was made at one of these meetings, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, to try to have it all on the same day because of wanting to all vote on the school budget at the same time.
Not an unfair advantage one way or the other.
Yeah, if two towns had voted one way and the third towns would be meaningless, they would have trouble getting people to their town meeting, maybe.
And just the last question, since we're touching on kind of discussions, inter-town discussions. If I understand correctly, all three of our communities are negotiating our non-school contracts as well this year. All of the contracts, is that right?
Yes, I think
Police,
we
fire,
did talk
highway,
about that
and-
last time.
Yeah. So are your discussions ongoing? Have they begun?
They haven't begun yet. We engaged a firm, Myrick and O'Connell from Westboro/Boston to do that for us this year. 3-year contracts is what I believe the intent is at this time.
I had mentioned at one of the earlier meetings that historical practice in Stowe, and it's different for every community, that works best for us. We always do 1-year contracts. In a way, it would be better in a certain economy to have a longer term than if things start coming back, we can come back and bite you with higher settlements in the outfield. But, you're negotiating, have you begun?
We are currently,
We've started.
we are currently negotiating, and we do 3-year contracts as well.
So that's your goal, so how many
Yes.
units do you negotiate?
Well, we do police, dispatch, DPW, fire. Fire is done. Dispatch has started. I have scheduled dates with DPW, and we're trying to start, we're trying to agree on, I shouldn't say trying to agree, we're in the process of trying to determine a first meeting date for police, so it's very preliminary.
Do you do that in-house or with council?
I do it myself, and with advice from council, but council doesn't sit in on them, council doesn't sit in on them unless I make the request.
And yours is, you do have council at the table?
Yes.
Well, we do not, the town administrator does all of our
Mhm.
negotiations, just for comparison.
The board chose to go council.
Thank you. We're 15 minutes ahead of the time now, just get, well,
I'm
right on
impressed.
time.
Right on
impressed.
time, right on time.
So if there's no other comments, questions,
Move to adjourn.
make a motion, adjourn, and thank you again. I really do, as Dawn mentioned, value the school committee presence. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.